Lastly, we have Lee Tiedrich, a distinguished faculty fellow in law and responsible technology with appointments in Duke's Pratt School of Engineering, Duke Medical School, and Science and Society. Lee's work sits at the intersection of technology, law, and policy, making her a leading authority on data and artificial intelligence. Before joining Duke, she was a partner at Covington and Burling LLP, where her practice spanned various data and technology matters, including policy, governance, intellectual property, regulatory compliance, transactions, and digital transformation. Her insights today will shed light on the legal and ethical aspects of data and AI and offer a unique perspective on responsible technology.
Thanks so much, Kay. By way of background, I once upon a time was a Duke engineer, but from Duke Engineering, I went on to law school and practiced law for a long time. We'll just leave it at that. And a lot of my work focuses at the intersection of technology, law, and policy. So what I thought I would do is share some insights with you on where the legal and policy landscape is going, and first talk about it broadly, and then zoom in and talk about how this is impacting the environment. So just a couple observations. If you're following the AI law and policy landscape, which is changing daily, there's a lot changing. I think a couple things are clear. I mean, first of all, it has emerged as a global and multidisciplinary field. It's global because touching upon some of the ethical issues, what we do in North America, what we do in the global North is impacting people in the global South. And as we think about, we're all facing a climate crisis, we're all facing biodiversity loss, and we all have a responsibility to make sure that our actions are treating the global community fairly. It's also a global issue because we want competition, we want innovation. If you read the popular press, you see a lot of complaints about certain companies monopolizing technology, and in order to have more competition, we need more innovation, we need more opportunities for entrepreneurship. And if we can have some degree of harmonization of laws across different countries, it makes it easier to foster that harmonization, because if companies don't have to have a different set of protocols for Europe as opposed to the US, as opposed to Asia, you can have a lot more competition. Picking up on what some of the prior speakers said, it truly is a multidisciplinary field. I think Sean from Duke Energy really emphasized this, and I know this from I saw it firsthand in my 30 years of practice, that when companies are thinking about how do we do responsible artificial intelligence, it's an all hands on deck approach. It really takes a village to solve the problem. So you definitely need to start with your data scientists and your technical experts, but you need to be talking to the ethicists, because you need to be thinking about the questions. Is what we're doing fair? Is what we're doing reasonable? You need to talk to the business people, because you want to make sure that what you're doing aligns with the company's business objectives. And you need legal in there as well, because the laws are moving super, super quickly, and you want to make sure that you're compliant. As I used to tell clients when I was in practice, it's not a good situation to be in, to be building a tool, building a system, and then find out when you're ready for deployment that it doesn't comply with the law, and then you have to go back and undo it. Better to kind of address all those issues up front. So where we are today, kind of a picture's worth 1,000 words. We're really at this inflection point where the technology, artificial intelligence, has evolved so much quicker than the law. And policymakers around the world are running super quickly to try to catch up. If those of you have been following the headlines last night and tomorrow, headline, President Biden is supposed to be signing a big artificial intelligence executive order on Monday. We've heard a lot of leaks as to what is coming out of that. Europe, the European Union is on the cusp of adopting broad sweeping AI legislation that's going to have global impact, because if you are doing business in Europe, it's going to impact you, even if you don't have operations in Europe. And policymakers worldwide, there's a big UK AI safety summit. The multilateral organizations are involved. And kind of at the 50,000 foot level, what are policymakers trying to do? I mean, simply put, they're trying to capitalize on the benefits of artificial intelligence. So the benefits include global prosperity. We want to protect our security as a nation, and certainly some of the recent wars have underscored the importance of global security. And we want to help achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And if you look at what all the policymakers around the world have said, that's front and center. How can our AI, how can data be a tool that helps us address climate change, helps us make healthcare available more quickly? The big question is how to do this. And that's where, even at the policy level, it requires a multidisciplinary approach. I mean, here today, I've been really struck by all the great solutions that people are developing. And we want to make sure that our policymakers all around the globe are informed of those decisions so they can structure laws, policies that create the right incentives to do the right things and achieve the objectives. So even at the policy level, it's multidisciplinary. And one of the things I've observed, in addition to my role at Duke, I'm very active in the policy arena, talk to people in the US government a lot, but also do a lot in the international policy space. And I think because of the international nature of this, one of the things that I'm seeing is that the multilateral organizations are really driving a lot of policy. So I'm going to talk a little bit, sort of shifting gears onto how are we using AI to help address the climate crisis, and talk about some of the work that I do through the Global Partnership on AI, which is a multilateral organization. So just really briefly, GPAY has 29 member countries, and it brings together, kind of consistent with that multidisciplinary approach. Each of the member country has appointed experts, and then there's some self-nominated experts. So I'm part of the expert group within GPAY, and we have 4 different working groups: the Responsible AI Working Group, Data Governance, Innovation and Commercialization, and Future of Work. So within the Responsible AI Working Group, we have a separate working group, which we affectionately call Project RAISE, the Responsible AI Strategy for the Environment. So I'm one of the 3 global co-leads for Project RAISE, and some of what we do. So anyway, before I get into Project RAISE, there's just a huge push internationally to try to come up with safe, effective AI. And where we are today, Europe is going in one direction, the US is going in a different direction. We all have the same goals of trying to create responsible AI, but the mechanisms are different. So what we're seeing is the G7, the UN, OECD, GPAY are really leaning in to try to create some level of harmonization here. So at the recent G7 summit, leaders established the Hiroshima AI process, and within that they charged GPAY, OECD, the UN to try to come up with projects. So within Project RAISE, what we're trying to do is develop and implement a strategy for the adoption of responsible AI for climate, as well as biodiversity loss. And oftentimes, we talk a lot about climate, but our work has shown that biodiversity loss is equally as pressing, because we have so many endangered species in the world. A lot of them are in the global south, and the climate crisis is also leading to biodiversity loss. So what we try to do is develop strategies to help address these solutions, and we work with a lot of institutional partners and try to bring the world together. I mean, I think a lot of our power is in the convening of trying to bring all the great minds together and lead to great projects. So this slide just shows some of the organizations that we've had the pleasure of working with, and if any of you want to get involved in GPAY, just shoot me an email, because the more the merrier. We want to tap into great minds. So I thought what I would do is just talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done through Project RAISE within GPAY. And we really have tried to make sure that we look at both the climate change side and the biodiversity side. So I'm not going to be able to do the reports justice, but we've commissioned both reports. They're up on the GPAY website. And some of the things that kind of cut through both reports are kind of reinforcing what all the global leaders have been saying, that there is huge potential of AI to address the climate crisis, to address biodiversity loss, but we need to do it responsibly. What are some of the challenges, and try to come up with a path for solutions. So it was really interesting in terms of some of the common challenges that we identified. One of them that came up over and over again is the need for data. AI requires good data, and we just don't have enough data infrastructure available right now that can responsibly share the data. And then within GPAY, we also work across other projects on trying to address what we've called the AI data challenge. How can we make the data available in a responsible and trusted way that also protects privacy, protects rights? So that's something that we do. we also highlight the need for funding, that in order to make this happen, we have to have more institutional funding for this work. The need to continue with the R&D to develop systems where we can actually address some of these challenges and deploy them efficiently and effectively. One of the other themes that comes out is the need for appropriate measurement tools. Through some of the work I've done with GPAY and OECD, a lot of companies are doing reporting on environmental impacts on AI, and we really don't have measurement techniques, and that there's a lot of greenwashing that's going on, and we need to have measurements and tools to try to abate that and have more transparency on that. And then finally, both reports really highlight the need to make sure that we're not adversely impacting the Global South, and particularly the work on biodiversity underscores that the Global South has been impacted disproportionately by some of these developments, and we need to pay attention to that. And it also expands into the labor issue, the data issue, that we don't want to be in a world where we're just using data from the Global South and they're not getting the benefits from the data. We need to treat people equally. So our work, we started with the AI and climate, and we've released some AI readiness booklets because we're all about principles to practice. So we've already published one booklet for advice for the energy industry on how they can do this, and we'll be having 3 more booklets come out. And then in my time remaining, the reports also have a lot of examples of how AI, the AI for good, the potential. We've also looked at the flip side of this in a report that we did jointly with the OECD, and we presented last year at COP27, because we said, and this came out in the reports, that while AI can be a great tool to help with the environment, we have to make sure that we are not expanding the environmental footprint and adverse effects with respect to artificial intelligence. So this report that we did in combination with the OECD looks at the question of, how do we measure the direct and indirect environmental impacts of artificial intelligence? And the takeaway from the report is that we have a lot more work to do, that we don't have standard measurement tools, we don't have standard reporting mechanisms where we can hold companies, hold organizations accountable for how to do this. So in terms of this report and sort of measuring the environmental impacts, a couple things that we did was, one, we took a very life cycle approach, that when we try to figure out what are the environmental impacts, we have to look at the whole life cycle, look at the production of the raw material, the chips, looking at the transport, looking at the operations. And there's been articles recently on how ChatGPT and other large language models are just consuming huge amounts of water and huge amounts of electricity. How do we measure that? And then also looking at the end of life as well, that is, equipment gets retired, what are the environmental impacts of that? And then other things that we do is we talk about in the report that we have to look at the direct impacts. So how is AI, and separate and apart from the broader compute stack, adversely impacting the environment in terms of carbon emissions and things that you can directly measure from the data site, but also looking at other negative impacts, what we call the indirect impacts. For example, we don't want artificial intelligence increasing consumption, so there are more cars on the road, so net, the environmental impact is worse. We're also looking at it that, we don't want artificial intelligence to be used in a way that encourages more fossil fuel exploration that has adverse impacts. So, really these are kind of foundational reports. Over the past year, we held, because again, I think a lot of our power within GPAY is a convener. We launch projects. So for example, on the data side, that was something we highlighted in our report. And since we did that report, the UK has come forward with some funding to create a data commons for climate. So we're still involved in kind of consulting on that project, but we kind of help create some of these projects. I think going forward for 2024, we're going to be really concentrating on how do we implement responsible AI in an environmentally friendly way. How do we work on the measurement tools? We're working with researchers around the world. We're working with other organizations in the UN. So anybody who wants to get involved is welcome to get involved. And again, it's all interconnected because we work a lot with people on the data challenge. How do we responsibly share data? I was struck by the fact that you talked about making data available with Creative Commons licenses. And I've also launched a whole project in GPay through the Innovation and Commercialization Working Group focusing on data sharing, and the fact that Creative Commons licenses today were never designed with data in mind, and they don't address a lot of the issues. And I work very closely with Creative Commons on this, and how can we foster the tools that will facilitate that responsible data sharing. So it's legal, we need to be able to have the contracts, and as I always say, the contracts, the policies don't work without the input from the technical experts coming up with data cards, coming up with the privacy enhancing technologies to kind of pull it all together. So it's all a work in progress, but it's inspiring to work with a lot of great minds, both here at Duke and in the broader community. And if anybody is interested in getting involved in our work, shoot me an email because we'd love to have you. So with that, I will turn it back to Kay.